Welcome into Warchant TV, where we are recapping the 2021 season as the calendar is changing for everybody from 2021 to 2022. Alongside the founder and administrator of Warchant.com, he is Gene Williams. He's Mr. Analytics, Mr. PFF on Warchant.com. My name is Tom Lang. I'm the director of original content over at Warchant and Warchant TV. And before we get going today and we talk about the numbers and the analytics, please remember, everybody, help us with the algorithms and the analytics ourselves by hitting the thumbs up button right at the bottom of this video, and make sure you subscribe to our channel as well. The subscribe button has a bell right next to it. If you hit all three of those things, you're doing a couple of things. Number one, you're helping us out at Warchant TV to find Nole fans who want some of our great coverage, because we have live programming 1 o'clock weekdays after the holidays are over. We've got recruiting chats, transfer portal videos. Every time there's a big announcement surrounding Florida State football and all the other programs around Florida State, Warchant TV has you covered. So hit subscribe and the bell. Your homepage will have us right there every time you log on to YouTube. So thank you for your support. All right, Gene, so we're diving into the numbers. How much did Florida State improve? How much did they not improve? We're going to start with the good news, though, because one segment group stood out, and you can find this partner piece on warchant.com. Gene, what did you find about the biggest improvements in 2021 for the Noles versus the year prior, Mike Norvell's first as FSU head coach?
Well, it's crazy when you start looking at the numbers, how it seems like early in the season we were thinking, well, it's a foregone conclusion that Adam Fuller was going to be canned, or he was at least close to being on the chopping block. But boy, did those numbers turn around. I mean, they turn around when you look season-wise. I mean, you can look at the total defensive numbers. I mean, to jump up to 66, I think most people, as bad as the defense was in 2020, you say number 66, I think every fan would say, yep, we'll take that. But really what stood out is all the numbers is the improvement as the season went on. And that's what you want to see. You want to see a team continue to improve in all the segments. When you compare, Tom, the second half averages to 2020, it's dramatic. You're talking 150 yards less per game in those final 6 games compared to 2020, and almost 10 points a game. I mean, that's ridiculous just on the standard stats. And yeah, and PFF backs that up too. Florida State, huge improvements on that side of the ball across all the PFF grades there. So, I mean, that's just, and we can get some of the details. I think especially on that part of it was the run defense was dramatically better. They were giving up about 55 fewer yards per game. Just look at the yards per carry, which is probably the most indicative stat to me. You went from 5.1 per carry to 3.6, which is really good. Your PFF ranking, which is unbelievable. The run defense went from 89 nationally, which is obviously not very good, to number 10 overall. Yep. Giving up the run defense grade was an 87.7. That is stellar. And that you just don't see those kind of jumps from a certain segment on a team. So that's really hats off to what the staff was able to do in terms, we'll talk about some of the players bringing in certain players that beef that up. And the defense, the defensive staff has to get some credit too. They're putting guys in the right position and being able to excel. I mean, when you're able to shut down one segment of another team, as you know, Tom, it dramatically improves your ability to hold a team up, scoring points, and win more games.
Yeah, one thing, Gino, and we do this with the post-game show during the regular season, one thing that I noted as the season went along, we talked about it, was once it seemed like they found the guys that they liked in the secondary and certain homes for them. Like, for example, Jamie Robinson playing more safety than he did corner. And they moved some guys to corner. Kevin Noles became the new nickel back for Florida State. It seemed like once those roles were carved out, those big pass plays down the field that would happen 2 and 3 times a game were down to maybe once a game. And that makes a huge difference for Florida State. And the other thing that you're pointing out, too, that makes, I think, a lot of Nole fans really pause for a moment and reflect on how the defense improved. The way we looked at the schedule before the season, it was you got to get fat in your first 6 games because the offensive firepower relative to this season is going to come in the second half. You're going to have a lot of offenses that are much more explosive. And Florida State was able to hold those teams down in late October and November. Truly impressive stuff. But when we move to segment groups and or individual facets of the game that improved for Florida State, what were some things that you saw there? You've mentioned a couple already, run defense being one. But what are some things that stuck out to you? Either it's a segment group specifically or a facet of the game where FSU improved this past season.
Yeah, in the article, which you can read at warchant.com, I talked 3 really highlights, improvements, and then 3 that were kind of iffy, maybe a downgrade. I mentioned the run defense early at the outset, but I think the other one, again, surprise, pass rush. And here's a segment where Florida State had nowhere to go but up. I mean, they were absolutely horrific last year. Remember, Tom, what was the number they had? I think they had 9 total sacks
Yeah.
And I think that was the number in all of 2020, which is that's bad. That's really freaking bad. And they're up to 33 this year. And of course, we know, a big part of that, again, it's the transfer portal. Obviously, Jermaine Johnson, Keir Thomas, those guys had 18 and a half combined, those two players. So that's going to beef it up. But you know what? I think we get, and one of the weird things on the PFF, and look, I love having a third party that's going to give you some objective grades on stuff. I don't always agree with PFF. The one big disagreement I have when I look at FSU is the coverage grades really did not improve. But as you talked about, Tom, the eyeball test, especially second half of the season, those guys were, the separation was less. That guys were getting their hands on the ball. There were twice as many pass breakups as last year, a lot more interceptions. So they improved across the board. And I think some of those pressures and some of those sacks are credit to the secondary, because that's part of it too. When a quarterback's got to make his reads and his progression, if that first and second guy are covered, that gives a lot more opportunity for those guys up front to get in those face, get the pressures, get the sacks. So to me, yeah, the run defense and the ability to get to the passer were dramatically improved. And that's why those yards per game, those points per game have dropped way down, especially as the season went on.
Well, it's another thing, there's a yin and a yang to every facet, and players who are game changers. And when you have the pass rush that Florida State did, and the word was out and the film was there to review for opposing offenses, what do you have to do? You have to scheme around them. You got to double team those players like a Jermaine Johnson. Keir Thomas for a while last season too, really flashed. And then you've also got to leave in extra blockers. Well, what does that also do in turn?
Mm-hmm.
Fewer players release into routes. So if you can handle those players, now the quarterback is pumping and waiting. And every once in a while, you get a coverage sack, not just because of your excellence up front, but because of the long game. They have to scout for you, and therefore the advantage tips towards the defense. And again, I go back to that Miami game, Gene, with how explosive that offense was consistently. Once Van Dyke, the speed of the game slowed down for Tyler Van Dyke, what Florida State was able to do with multiple interceptions and a strip sack fumble from Jermaine Johnson. It's just, this was a group that could be feared. It wasn't good for Florida State in the last 5 years. That front four was legitimately good across the board in the entire country. ACC, SEC, didn't matter. We had a really good front four this year. That's what the task is for Mike Norvell in the offseason, to replace a lot of that firepower, specifically at edge rusher. All right, so we've talked about a lot of positive things. It's time to flip over to some of the things that stood out negatively, things that did not improve from 2020 to 2021. I can imagine that there's a phase of the game that's probably in this group of three, but I'll let you tell us. What did you find this year that did not get better?
Yeah, I put it up again. There's three things that I wasn't thrilled with, or at least didn't really improve. In two of them, you can kind of were basically, not that big of a deal. But the one that's just glaring, one that stood out, and everybody knows, it's no spoiler here. It's special teams were absolutely horrible. This is one thing where the advanced analytics back up the eyeball test. You saw Florida State couldn't return punts. They couldn't kick field goals. They were horrible in coverage, just everything across the board. So there was a dramatic decrease in all the numbers on special teams. And PFF, Florida State went from a number 11, which I'm surprised they're actually that high last year. They were okay on special teams. I thought last year it wasn't a liability, but you dropped down to, according to PFF, number 102, and there's only 120 something teams, so that's not good. And I'm like, okay, let's look at another one. So if anybody follows the advanced analytics, you heard of Football Outsiders. I like a lot of stuff they do too. And they had Florida State special teams at 106. So when you're at 100 in a segment group, especially when this is a coaching staff that is known for having really good special teams, that was horrific. And I don't think there's any doubt in our mind that cost Florida State a game or two, as bad as they were on special teams. And all the numbers back that up. So that's not really a surprise, but it just emphasizes how bad Florida State was in that segment.
Yeah, there's no doubt that there were a couple of games, Gene, that even if Florida State ended up winning, like Boston College, for example, the Eagles got back into the game because of things the special teams couldn't do, like cover a kick. And it was
Syracuse, same thing. That game was over.
Yep, that's so. Yeah, the Syracuse game was over. The muff punt. That was a 10-point FSU lead at that point.
And Florida, who knows what happens in that game? Florida State's it's a 3-point game, I believe, in that second half, and you still had the feeling, as bad as they played, they got a shot to win that. Muff punt, boom, and that eventually opened the floodgates. Game over.
Timid players all around, and kick coverage and kick returns, punt returns. Sometimes your punting average was well under 40 yards. It was everywhere. It was hard to ignore. Even if you tried to, you'd still get mad every week about special teams, and we certainly had our share of that this year. Gene, any other things that stood out for again, what didn't improve quickly before we get to the most improved player, because we'll end on a high note as well as we get into the new year?
Yeah, and nothing really. I mean, I think the one thing is a little bit, I guess it goes hand in hand. I think we're a little surprised running and run blocking wasn't better. Actually, if you look at the numbers, both the standard numbers, the yards per rush, and the PFF grades, they slightly decreased
Mm.
from last year. And you would think with the offensive line coming back, all your running backs coming back, you would have been a little bit better rushing the football. So that was a little bit surprising. But the other hand, the pass blocking did improve a significant amount. So obviously that's an area that Alex Adkins, the new co-offensive coordinator, still offensive line coach, an area they really need to work on with a lot of those guys coming back. I would think that's a segment that needs to improve a lot going into 2022.
Yeah, there's no doubt. The one thing that was funny to look at the entire season was the difference between the running game grade and the run blocking grade.
Mm-hmm.
Because Florida State's running game would be in the green or the blue, which in PFF speak is excellent. But then the run blocking would be in the orange or the yellow, which is not so good in PFF speak. But that was the case. It was consistent that way. So they were explosive when they had chances. They made big plays, but there was not that consistency to be able to gain those 3 and 4 yarders. And we saw that all season long. Florida State had to work around it, and they did, to find their way to 5 wins. So I think people can probably guess this one, Gene. Who was the most improved player for Florida State from 2020 to 2021?
Yeah, the last part of the article, I want to look more at the players individually instead of the segments to see who increased, who didn't. I get just to get on the side before we get to the most improved player. It was interesting to me that every full-time starter, nobody basically went down. Maybe like 1 point in a grade or something like that. But I mean, that's another testament to the players, to the coaches, that across the board, everybody improved at different levels, but nobody jumped like our guy, Jordan Travis. I mean, unbelievable. You can look at the traditional numbers, what he was able to do in terms of, completion percentage, 55% to 63%. That's a big thing. 6.6 to 6 touchdown interception ratio to 15.6 QBR was dramatically improved. But the PFF really just jumps off the page at what he was able to do. I mean, it's unbelievable that he's, I think he went to number 27 nationally in passing grade for full-time starters in the country. And that was from a jump from number 131, which I think there was a lot of different quarterbacks in there, to number 27. So that shows a huge increase in what he was able to do throwing the football. Jordan Travis can run the football. And I think this was interesting, Tom, because we saw this in the spring. We saw that he was a better player. Now, a lot of the fans went out in the spring game. They go, well, Mackenzie Milton looks better. Okay, but not what we saw all springs. And they get we get the end of the Notre Dame game. Mackenzie comes in against the spent Notre Dame defense. Go, Mackenzie Milton. I mean, once he was given the chance, I think everybody saw what we saw in the spring. We saw that improvement. And again, it's exciting to think, what is he going to do with an entire offseason to continue to improve? And now you've already seen through the transfer portal some improvement at the wide receiver position. Just think of if they can get 1 or 2 guys who can be legitimate Power 5 wide receivers, how good could Jordan Travis be next year? It's got to be very exciting for that passing game and for this team looking ahead at what Jordan Travis could bring to them.
Yeah, the changing point, the turning point was the North Carolina game, where we saw a lot of these indicators, Gene, at spring camp, even in fall camp, when he was healthy enough to participate in practice. Jordan Travis looked like a calm passer who was going through his progressions. And the question was, is it because of the green non-contact jersey he's wearing, or is this legitimate improvement? And by the time you got to the second half of the season, he looked like the player that we saw in spring and fall camp. It was very different. Some of the throws he made, even in the loss at Clemson, that game wasn't great for the offense, but some of the things that Jordan did to get from progressions 1 through 4, some of the checks he made were excellent. Same thing against Miami. You're right. If these players like a Micah Pittman, like a Johnny Wilson, and maybe some others that are joining Florida State from the transfer portal, if these are legitimate targets who can, even if it's 50-50 that they win one-on-ones, that's a huge improvement in the ability to win one-on-one battles. Didn't happen last year, point blank, for the receivers here at Florida State. So it could be very interesting. But the game had slowed down for Jordan. If he can stay healthy, that's going to be the number one question for him. If he can stay healthy, he's going to be an extremely explosive and productive player, no matter what happens, if it's a run first, second, and third offense, or if it's a balanced offense. But we shall see. The numbers say overall, Gene, that Florida State, this was a successful season for the coaching staff and getting more out of the players. But you say, on the whole, if you look at the entirety of this resume, the coaching staff did a good job of developing and getting better this season, even though Florida State was 5-7.
Oh yeah, I mean that's, again, you got to look at the numbers. I mean, we all want to look at wins, losses, and that's ultimately what matters. But you got to see improvement across the board. We saw it by almost every segment. You saw it across the board. Like I said, players, really nobody went down. and several players increased. I think there's a list of about 8 guys on there that had dramatic over a 10-point jump in their grades from last year to this year. So that says a lot there too. So yeah, I mean, across the board. Hey, and going back to Jordan, man, 2 things in the offseason he's got to work on: throwing that jump ball to that 6'7" wide receiver, or in the end zone, man, that little fade, whatever you can do, man, work on that all season. Sliding and getting out of bounds. That's the most important thing, because he's gotten better, but he still likes to throw his body in there. He does not have the body type to take those hits. So Jordan, work on those things, and that could be big. Yeah, so it's exciting if you're an FSU fan, if they can continue this trend of improvement. If they do, I think the wins are going to start coming at a much higher rate in 2022.
Yeah, there's no doubt things got better this season, everybody. But 5-7 is not going to cut it next year. Period. So
Nope.
that's the next step for Florida State, is to see the development turn into even more wins. And we all remember, I won't even mention the team name, but there was this game in September that if they had just taken care of business, we'd be doing a bowl preview show right now. But that's all we have for today on Warchant TV. We are closing in towards New Year's, so 2021. We're going to punt it down the field, and we're going to cover that punt, Gene. And then 2022 rolls in for spring camp not too far from now. Stay tuned to Warchant TV, because we've got all kinds of great features. We're revisiting our top 40 from 2021, taking a look at what we got right, what we did not get right. We're talking about the ACC officials. It's a countdown of excellence, in quotations, from ACC officials. We've got more Warchant recruiting information. I'm sure there'll be probably another transfer in another week. That's how this all works with the transfer portal game. You got it all right here at Warchant TV. Please, if you have not done so already, hit the like button, subscribe to our channel, and you'll be up to date on all things Florida State sports. For the founder and administrator of Warchant.com, he is Gene Williams. My name is Tom Lang. We will talk to you all next time.